Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is video 20 from the Beginner to Chess Master playlist, which is a progressive series of videos. And I'd like to share with you the Philidor position. The Philidor position is another one of those very popular rook and pawn endgames. That is a must-know. This is an endgame that is more popular than the Lucena position. The Lucena position is one that I covered in video 19 in this series. If you've been tracking it closely, you'll recall. Just as a refresher, this is the Lucena position. The stronger side's king is the one who stands in front of the pawn. I went on to illustrate a universal method to winning this position type. I showed how to win as the stronger side. Compare this with now the Philidor position, or what is just about a move away or an idea away from being the Philidor position. In the Philidor position, it is now the weaker side's king who stands in front of the pawn. This difference matters. What we are trying to do now as the weaker side is hold this position to a draw. Plenty of games can result in this type of an endgame where you are unfortunately down a pawn. We want to see a way to hold this to a draw. What is a very simple and effective method to drawing this position? It is white to move. What to do? Before I share this simple and effective method to drawing, let me highlight a couple tempting yet faulty tries by white, so that we can better understand why the simple and effective approach to drawing is so good. Suppose white inserts a check from behind right now. King d3, he gets to hide behind the pawn. There are no ensuing file checks. And black has this idea of rook h1 trading rooks and winning the king and pawn endgame. As an example, suppose white makes a passing move. Black can give a check. White must block. The rooks are exchanged. King c2. And there will be no stopping black's next three moves. Black goes on to win. Suppose white plays rook to e1, stopping rook h1. Well, black can play the rook over to the other side and all of a sudden threaten mate in one. How to stop this? The king must try to flee. King c1, rook a1, white just dropped the rook and the game. What more to try from this position? Maybe the white king runs. King c1, black gives a check and flushes the king away from being in front of the pawn. In fact, we are now observing a role reversal. What do I mean by this? Well, it is now the stronger side's king who stands in front of the pawn. It is now the Lucena position that we are staring at. Black will now go on to win. Rook check at this moment here, no good. One other tempting move may be to pin the pawn to the king. This is not working either. King e3, rook a3, the pawn can block. Mate is already threatened. King c1, rook h1, and similarly, what we are noticing here is that the black king is able to get out in front of the pawn, and this will allow black to go on to win. Rook a2, the pawn continues to push. We can give a check. King d4, we get the king out of the pin, and we will be promoting next. In both of these tries, giving a check or pinning the pawn to the king, neither addresses the following. Neither prevents the black king, the stronger side's king, from getting out in front of the pawn. You may recall from video 8 in this series, the video titled How to Promote a Pawn. One of the terms that I used in that video was that when it's a king and pawn versus king, the king likes to play a leadership role. He likes to be the leader. He likes to be out in front of the pawn. Well, black likes to establish that same thing in these position types as well, when there's also a rook involved. He likes to play leader role. He wants to be out in front of the pawn. Well, we just saw that being able to be out in front of the pawn is good. You may eventually arrive at the Lucena position, where the stronger side will go on to win. If this is something the stronger side wants, to have their king out in front of the pawn, what do you think a good drawing method would be for white? It would be to prevent the stronger side's king from getting in front of the pawn. So, the drawing method, the simple and effective drawing method here is rook to a3. What are we doing? We are cutting the king off. We're not allowing the stronger side's king to be in front of the pawn. We just observed how that can get us in some trouble. We'll go on to lose if the king is able to get out in front of that pawn. Now, what is this doing exactly? Well, what can black do at this point? He can give a check, but we'll just step up. He can give another check, we just step back. This is not progress by black. What other try is there? Rook g2, black has just made a waiting move. We can make a waiting move as well, staying on the same rank. We want to stay in a position where we cut the king off. Rook b3. Another, black could give another check. We would just repeat. We go up. As soon as black pushes the pawn, this is now where we reposition our rook. We move the rook all the way back and get in a position to give checks to the black king. You'll notice something. As soon as this pawn moves, d3 in this case, the square d3 is no longer a safe haven for the black king. In the first faulty attempt that I shared with you, once this check was given, the king was able to play to d3 and be shielded by the pawn. There are now no file checks. However, in this position here, as soon as the pawn moves to d3, the square d3 is no longer a safe haven for the stronger side's king. We play our rook all the way back, and now we are prepared to give checks to black. Black can give a check, we simply step up. That's the only legal move in this case. Another check, we simply stay back on the same file as the pawn. No problem. King e3, threatening mate in 1. Well, it's our move. Now we start giving checks, and there is not a good way to stop them. We just keep giving checks. If the king goes too far away from the pawn, we can get right behind, and soon enough, we will be hunting down the pawn. So this is the key idea. We want to cut the king off. Now, this method here applies to a pawn that is a few moves away. Even if I were to shift this up a rank, even if it's 4 moves away, the same method can be applied. The same idea here is to cut off the king. What's the move here as white? Rook to a4. We're stopping the king from playing that leader role. We're stopping the king from getting out in front of the pawn. This method can be applied to any file pawn. I'd like to also highlight an additional defensive resource that applies to knight pawns and rook pawns. Okay, so the A, B, G, and H pawns. Here's an additional method to drawing this endgame. Okay, this is again specific to rook pawns and knight pawns. Defending side's king is in front of the pawn. We can play down to C1, to the promotion rank, and this will be good enough to hold as a draw as well. I would recommend that you still implement this idea to cut off the king right away, but with regard to knight pawns and rook pawns, this is an additional defense to play to that promotion rank, and there won't be a good way to disrupt the king position. Black can give a couple checks, but this is not any progress. There is no getting to the H1 square. In this case, black could try something like this, but they will actually go on to lose. Rook check, drop the rook in the game. So Knight pawns and rook pawns, there is this first rank defense or promotion rank defense. To see why this is not working for the bishop pawns, the C pawns, the C pawn, F pawn, or the center pawns, the D and E pawns, let's see why this first rank defense is not good. Rook C1 in this case. Now, if we just stay on this first rank, what's going to happen is that there's Rook H1, threatening Rook H1. King G1 can now be met with F2 check, and our king is forced away from defending that corner square. Knight pawn was not able to force our king away from the corner square. Rook H1, we drop the rook in the game. So again, this cutting off idea is one that we can apply to all file pawns. And there is also an additional drawing method involved with the knight pawns and the rook pawns, and that is a first rank defense, where we can play to this promotion rank and simply stay there with our rook, and we will be able to hold that to a draw. One last thing that I think you may find interesting is as follows. Here is another position where it is white to move, and basically as a little bit of a close to this video, here's a pop quiz. What would you do as white in this position? If you'd like to, go ahead, pause the video, see what you would do as white. Okay. It may appear that white is in some serious trouble here. There is only one move that white can make that is good. White can hold this position to a draw with the following move. Rook to E2. This is a nice little drawing resource. I can recall this idea being implemented in the U.S. Chess Championship 2013 between Alejandro Ramirez, playing as white. Wasn't this exact position, but this idea was implemented in that game. It was a playoff game between Alejandro Ramirez and Gata Kamsky. There is this stalemate resource. Rook check, pawn takes, stalemate. If black doesn't take the rook, well, now the rook gets to go in a position to give checks from behind, and the game will result in a draw, basically establishing now, basically having a Philidor position on board. So this is a little stalemate trick that may spring about if the conditions are right, the kings being opposite from one another, and the white rook on the 2nd or 7th rank. There is this checking idea. This is an only move. This is the only move that will save this position, because checkmate is right around the corner, or this idea of flushing the king away and then being able to push the pawn through. So a nice little checkmate resource to be aware of. In this case, kings opposite from one another, rook e2 will result in a draw. So again, this is the big idea, just to cut off the king and stay there until the pawn moves. As soon as the pawn moves, you get the rook in a position to give checks from behind, and you will have no problem holding these position types to a draw. So, as usual, I hope you got something out of this video. Feel free to leave any feedback in the comment section below, and I'll catch you in the next one. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.